Hi everyone, my name is Natalie DC. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I'm a reader, writer, and artist here to talk about books with you, and art, and maybe a little bit of writing. Today, as you can tell, we are going to be doing the 5th installment of my rainbow reading series, where I talk about books that I read in each month corresponding to like the colors of the rainbow. So in May I read only blue books, so that's what I'm going to be talking about today. So without further ado, we have a lot of books to cover today. Let's get started. So in the month of May I read a total of 10 blue books, so those are the ones that we'll be going over today. So the first blue book that I read in the month of May is The Perfect Nanny by Leila Slimani, translated by Sam Taylor. This was translated from the original French in which it was written, and it follows Miriam, a French-Moroccan lawyer who lives in Paris with her husband and her 2 children. She is recently wanting to get back into working after raising her 2 children for years. So her and her husband go on a search for the perfect nanny, and eventually they find one, but not all is as what it seems, and horror starts to unravel and starts to disintegrate their family. This was marketed as a thriller mystery in which we follow both Miriam and the perfect nanny as their juxtaposing senses of motherhoods collide. We just follow their 2 lives until the climactic ending. Now, the ending is sort of spoiled at the beginning. I'm gonna talk about what it is, even though like it's technically a spoiler, but like it's mentioned in the prologue of the book, so technically it's not a spoiler. But basically what happens is that the book opens with this perspective in which we see that Miriam's children are dead, or at least one of them are, and yeah, like it's this whole like bloody mess in their apartment. So it's very gruesome, and it kind of spoils the ending, which I didn't appreciate because it makes the ending very predictable. The fact that their perfect nanny goes batshit insane and kills the children. Like, that was predicted upon page 1. Like, I don't know what they want me to do with this spoilery information. So yeah, I did not appreciate the spoilers right off the bat. Like, you make all this effort to not say anything in the synopsis, and then you just ruin it on page 1. Makes no sense to me. With that said, I did love the beautiful prose, the short chapters. You guys know I love my short chapters. They make my teeny tiny brain go brr. No, but seriously, I love short chapters. They just make the reading process so much easier, and the smooth transition between characters' perspectives, like it's not very jolted like in other books I've read where there's 10 million different characters and we need to know all of their perspectives, and they have like a chapter for each person and it just gets so confusing. Like this one, a very smooth transition between perspectives, and I felt that each perspective added something to the story instead of just it being there for no reason. So yeah, like I said, my main qualm with the book is its very predictable ending and therefore not so satisfying ending. So in the end, I gave this book 4 stars. I thought it was a very nice read. Definitely a good start to my introduction to Leila Slimani, who is not to be confused with Leila Leilani, another Moroccan author who I've mentioned in previous videos, one of my favorite new authors of this year. So yeah, not to confuse the 2 authors there, but yeah, Leila Slimani's work based off of this book, I did enjoy her writing, so I'll definitely try to pick up another one of her books in the future. But yeah, on to the next one. So the second blue book that I read in the month of May is An Arrow to the Moon by Emily X.R. Pan. I was introduced to Emily X.R. Pan a few years ago when I read her debut work, The Astonishing Color of Actor. I love that book so much. It became like one of my top 5 favorite books of all time, and since then I've been patiently waiting for her to release something new, and finally this year we got a Romeo and Juliet story, retelling mashed with Chinese mythology, and I can't tell you how excited I was to get this from my local library. I was so fucking excited to get my hands on this book, and I finally read it, and it did not disappoint. Don't worry, that was not me building up towards like a disappointing ending there. Yeah, it did not disappoint I gave this book 4.5 stars. This book follows two teenagers living in the 1970s, Hunter Yi and Luna Chang. While they are both living in very different circumstances, Hunter's family is poor and on the run from some mysterious man, and Luna's family is very rich and is kind of crushing her with their expectations of her. They are both kind of trapped in their own world, and they want to break free and be able to do their own thing without disappointing their family. Once they meet each other, much to the chagrin of their families, since their families do have a rivalry going back several decades, they form this friendship and they fall in love, and it's really cute and magical. Emphasis on the magical part, because these two protagonists end up having magic powers that are super unique. I've just really loved how beautiful and unique and tied to the characters' personalities that their magic powers were. I had never seen anything like this, and while it wasn't really explained much, I didn't really mind that lack of explanation because it was just so fun to read about. The pacing was perfect, the characters were lovable. I just wanted to give them a big hug. The chapters were short and digestible, switching between POVs seamlessly. There was a great bit of world building put into the story. You can tell the love and care that was put behind the story's messaging. I love the character dynamics. Luna and Hunter obviously have great chemistry, and Hunter's dynamic with his little brother is obviously super cute as well. The only qualm I have about this book is its lackluster connection to its setting, which takes place in the 1970s. I felt that there was no really cultural connection to this time period. This book could have taken place in modern day times and it would not have really made that much of a difference. So that was the only qualm I had about the story. It seemed like the 1970s plotline was kind of thrown in there in the last minute, but I don't know. That was my only qualm with this book. Everything else was beautiful, and while the ending, I'm not gonna spoil it, but the ending was tragic but bittersweet. It ended sadly, but it also gives the reader hope, and I think those are the best types of ending for any YA book. Seriously, check this book out. It was definitely one of my most highly anticipated reads of this year, and I'm so glad to say that it did not disappoint. So the next book that I read in the month of May is Rules for Visiting by Jessica Frances Kane. This book follows middle-aged May Attaway, who works as a botanist for her hometown's university. Once she's granted leave from her job that she's so diligently dedicated herself to for decades, she realizes that she hasn't been keeping up with all of the friendships she's made throughout her life, and so she sets on a heartfelt quest to use this leave time to spend time with the peers that she has drifted away from over the years. I thought this book was a super charming character study of this woman trying to find new friends and reconnect with old ones and eventually find something new within herself. The writing was a cute and quirky combination of Miranda July and John Green, so I know those are two authors whose writing styles are very unique and not everyone's cup of tea. So keep that in mind if you do want to pick up this book and you've read either Miranda July or John Green's work. Keep that in mind. If you didn't like their work, you might not like the writing style of this one, but I love both of their works, so the writing was very much impressing me. I found all of the nature references made throughout this book very interesting, and it truly shows the author's research being put to good use as far as kind of reinforcing May Attaway's botany background. The only thing that keeps me from giving this book a higher rating, I gave this book 3.75 stars, is the fact that not much happens in the book. It's kind of just one of those books where it's just following the character, nothing much happens, but we kind of see their dynamics with their friends, their family. But yeah, again, not much happens throughout the book. So if you don't care for books like that, would not recommend it. I do wish more happened just to give some more connection to the character and the story overall. So yeah, I gave this book 3.75 stars. I think it's a cute, quick read to ease your way into the literary fiction genre, or just as a light spring or summer read. I would definitely recommend it for that as well. Yeah, not much to say about this one. On to the next. The next book that I read in the month of May is Zachary, Ying and the Dragon Emperor by Xiran Zhao. Now, if you watched, I believe, my February wrap-up, you'll remember that I read Xiran Zhao, who is a creator on this platform. I read their debut novel, Iron Widow, and I had some thoughts about it. You can check out that video if you want to. But in summary, I did not care for it. I thought their writing could use a lot of work, their pacing was all over the place, and overall the book just did not land for me. But I decided to give them another chance and pick up their debut middle grade novel that was marketed as Percy Jackson meets Yu-Gi-Oh! Now I have if you've watched my previous videos, you know I have a very strong connection to the former Percy Jackson. I loved Percy Jackson growing up. I still love Percy Jackson, eagerly awaiting for the TV show. So yeah, I'm definitely a big stan of the Ryan universe. So when I heard Percy Jackson's name being uttered by Zhao's marketing team, I had to pick this one up despite my qualms about their previous published works. So this book is very similar to Percy Jackson in that it follows a young boy who is new to his school and he's just trying to fit in while trying to make his single mother proud. One day a magical mishap occurs where his mother's soul is kidnapped by demons and he is forced to follow these two children who are host to previous Chinese emperor's spirits and follow them to China in order to seal the ghost portal for the upcoming ghost month. Comes around and the portal is burst wide open and the underworld leaks into the real world and causes chaos upon the earth. So that is Zachary's quest, and he's thrown into this world of mythology mixed with VR, mixed with gaming. He doesn't know what to do, and that is where the first book of this series takes its reader. This book was an ARC from NetGalley, so thank you to NetGalley for gifting me this ARC. I like this book quite a bit more than Iron Widow. As I said, I felt the pacing was a little bit better. The writing definitely much better. The characters much more relatable, as Zachary is just a young boy thrust into this world, and we are in his shoes as we're very confused about this world as well, so we kind of learn as he learns about this world. The similarities to Percy Jackson were quite clearing. It actually got a bit annoying at some points, like how similar the two book series are, so that was something I had a qualm with. Also, the pacing still was a bit too fast for my liking. Literally every other page, the reader is introduced to another character, another concept in this magical, mythological world, and yeah, it was a bit much for my tiny brain to keep up with, so I would have liked if it had a slower pace like Percy Jackson did. However, I loved how informative yet still age appropriate this book was. I love the little tidbits that Zhao gives us about famous Chinese historical figures that I had never known about before. They present this information in a very entertaining way that is both relevant to the story and informative to the reader. So I definitely appreciated that. I've also seen a lot of people praise this book for its Chinese Muslim representation. Zachary Ying is Muslim and Chinese, so I definitely appreciate it for that rep as well as the LGBTQ representation, which, while it wasn't profound in this book, will be, I've heard, more profound in the books coming up. Another qualm I had about this book was the fact that Zhao still seems to struggle with writing battles, as I was always reading. There are many battles throughout the book, and whenever I was reading one, I was always confused where the characters are, like what's happening, and that's definitely not good for a book that is very battle heavy, and I would hope that in next installments of the series, Zhao will improve in their writing of those types of scenes. But other than that, I did again enjoy this book much more than Zhao's previous work, Iron Widow, so I gave this book 4 stars. I thought it was a very cute entry into the Zachary Ying series, and I'm looking forward to picking up the sequel to this series. So yeah, if you haven't read it yet, I would definitely check it out. The next blue book that I read in the month of May is The Matzah Ball by Jean Meltzer. This is a book that has dominated BookTok, booktube, bookstagram. Literally, the girlies are losing their minds over this book, and I was too before I picked it up. I was really excited to read a Jewish-centered romance, as it isn't something that I often encounter, especially one that has become so popular. So this book follows Rachel Rubenstein Goldblatt, who is a nice Jewish girl, but on the inside she is keeping a shameful secret, that being that she loves Christmas. She loves everything Christmas. She collects all types of Santa-themed paraphernalia, and yeah, she's just a Christmas stan, if you will. This bleeds into her career as a writer, as she is a very famous Christmas writer under a pseudonym, so no one in her actual community knows that she is this famous Christmas romance writer, and in turn this causes her to kind of have very strained relationships with her peers and her family. This combined with her chronic illness makes her kind of a social recluse. In comes our love interest, Jacob Greenberg, who comes to New York where Rachel lives to throw a matzah ball. Jacob happens to be Rachel's crush from summer camp when they were like 10 years old or something, so it opens up old feelings, new feelings, and eventually form a bantering sort of relationship and fall in love. So this book deals with the two 30-year-olds navigating adulthood, friendship, heartbreak, loss, and disability against this Hanukkah/Christmas background. I loved the quirky banter of this book. I loved the two leads banter especially, as well as the disability rep that Rachel provides. Unfortunately, that is where my praise ends, as the two leads, even though they are 30 damn years old, they are so fucking juvenile. They can't get over events that happened when they were like 10 years old. They can't get over about what happened. They just keep going back to it. Every other page, Rachel or Jacob is dwelling on something that happened at that summer camp 20 years ago, and it gets pretty exhausting after a point. That combined with the very weak third act, I thought there were very low stakes and just made it seem inevitable at that point that they were going to get together. Yet the third act conflict that is very typical of romances nowadays, it felt very forced in this instance, and I really didn't appreciate that. Finally, the romance, when it finally did get romantic, felt very vanilla, and while I know they are both, you know, practicing Jews, you know, practice modesty and stuff, I still felt it was pretty vanilla, especially since this book is marketed towards an adult audience. If this book had aged down protagonists, I think this would have served perfectly well as a young adult romance. Truly, I do not think it had to be an adult romance because the characters were already juvenile in their personalities, and they just kept talking about things that had happened to them when they were literal preteens. So I don't think it would have made much of a difference if they had just, you know. But yeah, those are my thoughts on this. I really wanted to love it again, but unfortunately it didn't live up to my expectations, so I gave it 3 stars. The next book that I read in the month of May is Siren Queen by Nghi. Now, I'm familiar with Nghi's works from her previous work, The Chosen and the Beautiful, which is a Great Gatsby retelling from an LGBT Asian actress's point of view, taking the role of Jordan Baker from The Great Gatsby. From the premise of that book, I knew I was gonna love that book, and one of the things that took me back to Nghi was her writing style. It is so flowery and beautiful. I just can't take my eyes off it, so I had to pick up Siren Queen, which is one of their newest works. This book follows Luli, who is a Chinese American growing up in pre-code Hollywood, as she tries to navigate the movie star industry while trying to become this movie star that she's always dreamed of becoming, even if it means becoming a monster. I don't really have much to say about this one. There was a lot going on throughout it, and I don't want to spoil anything, but needless to say, it's very magical, very Jennifer's Body horror-esque, very gay. I really enjoyed it. It was very entertaining. There's a 3-act structure, so Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3. While reading, I thought it broke up the structure of the plot very well, so I appreciated it for that, for its great pacing. The writing, as usual, gorgeous, no complaints. And this story definitely explores the atrocities committed by Hollywood during this time, especially to people of color, women, people who are LGBT. Yeah, I think this book does a great job exploring this, and I don't want to say much more because I want you to read it. It's under 300 pages, so it's a relatively short read. And yeah, I really loved it. I gave it 4 stars, the same rating I believe I gave The Chosen and the Beautiful. And while I'm unsure if I like this one better than The Chosen and the Beautiful, I can say that it is a story I will never forget. So seriously, check this out if you haven't already. The next book that I read in the month of May is The Perishing by Natashia Deón. Now, I talked about this book in my Mid-Year Freakout Tag portion of my previous video. This book was in the category of books that were surprises, and the reason this book was a surprise is because it has such a damn low rating on Goodreads. It has 3,000 plus ratings, which probably because it was a book of the month pick, which is partly why I chose this book, because I thought it was going to be, you know, good, because book of the month usually slaps with their reading selections. But a lot of people hated this book. They thought the pacing was weird. They thought the book was combining way too many elements, that it just didn't make sense. They didn't get the message, something along those lines. And I was afraid when I picked up this book that I would feel the same way. Fortunately, I did not. I actually really enjoyed this book. I gave it 4 stars. This book follows Lu, who is a black immortal who time travels to the 1930s with no recollection of who she is or where she's come from and where she's headed. The reader is taken back and forth between the past 1930s, where she's navigating her life, and the future, where she's being tried for the past crimes of her time traveling career. Eventually, Lu becomes the first black female journalist at the Los Angeles Times, and as she reads about and writes about the stories of people who look like her in Los Angeles, she slowly starts to realize the horrific state of the city and in turn the country that she lives in. So this book is definitely a combination of many things. It's historical fiction, it's sci-fi, it's speculative fiction, it's a commentary on race and class and gender. So I love hybrid genres such as these. I love stories that blend different genres together and do them well, mind you. And I thought this book did it pretty well, in my opinion. I thought the inclusion of historical events such as the mowing down of black spaces to make way for Route 66, or the killing of an innocent black girl. These were events that were touched upon in the book, and they are very relevant and reminiscent of events that are still occurring today in the United States of America. So I thought it was a very poignant, again, like commentary on class and race, and it is from a time that was almost a century ago and yet is still relevant to events happening today. So simply for that reason, I felt it was such a powerful read. Now, I do think the sci-fi plot could have been incorporated better, as it is kind of left as an afterthought. We don't really get a good explanation for the time traveling, like immortality, a bit of this novel. In the end, I didn't really fully grasp Lu's origins, but in the end, it almost doesn't matter because we are given this story. I don't really know how to explain it. You just have to read the book and see for yourself. While I felt the sci-fi element could have been added in more seamlessly, of course, and we could have connected more as a reader to Lu, I do think the story was worth telling. I definitely think it's a unique perspective and mode of storytelling to put forth this oh so important message. So yeah, I definitely recommend it if you haven't read it already. I don't know what's going on with the reviews, why people hate it so much. Personally, I liked it. Maybe I'm just in the minority as far as my opinion goes, but whatever. You guys read it, tell me what you think in the comments. The next book that I read in the month of May is Fault Lines by Emily Itami. This book follows a Japanese housewife living in Tokyo with her husband and her 2 children. While she, on the outside, seems to have the most perfect, idyllic life, on the inside, she's very much struggling. She no longer has this romantic connection with her husband, and she longs for the freedom that her youth used to offer her. The reader is taken on this journey in which the main character meets this restaurateur, as it is basically a character study of this woman who needs to finally learn to leave behind her nostalgic and romantic past and finally live in the present and appreciate what she has and kind of find meaning amidst this accidental affair that she has with this restaurateur. I love the short chapters. Again, there is a motif of earthquakes, hence the title Fault Line, that I really appreciated, and how it can like destroy your life piece by piece. Like, I really loved that motif that the author incorporated into the story. While not much actually happens, again, similar problem to Rules for Visiting, definitely enjoyed this book, would recommend. The next book that I read in the month of May is Blue-Skinned Gods by S.J. Sindu. This book follows a boy growing up in Tamil Nadu, India. He is born with blue skin and he's grown up to believe that he is a god, specifically the human incarnation of the Hindu god Vishnu. So as he's growing up, he is revered by the people in his village. People from around the world come to see him to see if he is truly a god. And growing up, he struggles with his own issues of self-doubt, questioning of faith, and questioning of sexuality. As Kalki grows up, loses members of his family as they move away or pass away, he eventually grows up, moves across the world to the United States, and eventually learns the bittersweet truth about his upbringing. I thought this book tackled a wide range of topics in such nuanced and poignant ways. The author tackles complex familial relations, cultural upbringing, faith, religion, sexuality, and just trying to live life after coming out of such a sheltered environment in such realistic and beautiful ways, combined with the gorgeous writing. I cannot even begin to describe to you how amazing S.J. Sindu's writing is. It led me to give this book, shocker, a 5 out of 5 stars. I tore through this book with such vigor. I loved the characters, and while I wish, you know, the third act, it became very fast-paced. It seemed like the author was kind of rushing. This was the part of the book where Kalki is grown up, living in New York City and discovering his sexuality and where he stands with his father. This part of the book I thought was the most rushed feeling, and I wish it kind of had that slower beat of his childhood and the earlier parts of the novel. But all in all, I loved this book so much. I'm definitely going to pick up more of S.J. Sindu's writing, and yeah, I would definitely recommend it. It's definitely a unique story. The premise is nothing like I've ever seen before, which is what drew me to this book in the first place, and yeah, there's not much more to say. I love this damn book. The final blue book that I read in the month of May, we're almost there guys, is Full Disclosure by Camryn Garrett. This book follows 17-year-old Simone as she's starting over in a new school after being bullied out of her old one after she is revealed to be HIV positive. It is revealed to the reader that she was born HIV positive, her mother had it and was passed down to her. So as Simone struggles to get acclimated to her new school and connect with her peers, the reader learns more about HIV, the stigmas and generalizations people make and misconceptions people have about HIV, and yeah, it's overall a very informative and very important novel about this topic while telling a great YA story. I love Simone and her love interest, Miles' romance. While it's a little love at first sight, I thought it was super cute. Miles' unabashed support of Simone during this hard time in her life is very adorable, so I definitely love the romance part. While I wish the background characters, specifically Simone's family members and her friends, I wish their characters were better described and characterized. As the author kind of doesn't show as far as their personalities and behaviors go. Ultimately, I really like this book. I gave it 3.5 stars. I definitely thought it was a decent read. It was because of this characterization problem that at the end, the twist villain who ends up being the person who stalks Simone ends up just being this random minor character that we don't really know much about, and it's supposed to be like this huge shocker even though the reader doesn't really know much about this character. So like, how would we have even guessed that? Now, of course, that makes it the opposite of predictable, but at the same time it's like out of the blue, like it doesn't really make much sense. So it is because of that characterization problem, it kind of affects the satisfaction of the finale of the book. So for that reason, that's why I gave this book 3.5 stars. But overall, I thought this was an important story to tell, and I would definitely recommend it for people who aren't aware about HIV or the stigmas and misconceptions that surround it, thanks to our wonderful American education system. That is the last book that I read in the month of May. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to give it a big thumbs up, comment down below your thoughts, comment down below the books that you read in the month of May or just recently. I know that I am late as far as this wrap up goes. I'm trying to catch up. And before you go, if you're interested in poetry, my debut poetry chapbook, Blue Pearl, is available for purchase from Bottle Cap Press, so you can check it out in the link in the description box below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!